resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Weird little cross-dressers. You think that preaching the gospel is so dangerous that the people who do it need to be in prison in shackles. You're serving someone other than the people of Canada, if you know what I mean. And then they're subsidizing the media to the point where all of your big media outlets, which are disgusting, are state media because they're taking state cash. Do you watch CBC?
Tucker Carlson was in Canada yesterday, but you already knew that, given how viral clips of his speeches in Calgary and Edmonton are right now on social media. Despite numerous petitions to try and get Carlson banned from entering into Canada and to have his events cancelled, the only pushback on the day came from a small handful of mask-wearing protesters. Good for them, I guess. We have highlights from both of Carlson's speeches last night coming up next, but first, drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel. Stick around for the ratio of the week, and the comment question for the episode is this. Why don't we have a conservative opposition in this country willing to say what Tucker Carlson is willing to say about Canada? Let me know your answer below, and let's get into it. We start with Carlson going after Justin Trudeau, who he claims to be a cross-dressing, closeted, creepy authoritarian. Take a listen.
I know that in Canada it's official policy that coming out of the closet is good. Unless you're the prime minister. But to look at your enemies, like let's say you had some sort of weird prime minister like to dress up in fussy costumes. It would be super important to point that out a lot, like relentlessly. He's like a ridiculous figure. Like you should dislike and resist Justin Trudeau and his government to the maximum extent of your ability. But before you do that, you should just laugh at him until you can't breathe. Seriously. The guy's like, he's showing up for a costume party when no one else is. There's no costume party, and there's Justin Trudeau. Like speaking as some sort of moral voice. Weird little cross-dresser. So anyway, that's my first piece of advice.
In his Edmonton speech, Tucker Carlson spent a considerable amount of time going after Chrystia Freeland, comparing Canada under Freeland and Trudeau to 1985 Albania.
I knew Chrystia Freeland when she was a journalist at the Financial Times, whose name shall forever live in infamy for employing her. And I remember even then thinking, this woman is not bright at all. But boy, does she have high self-esteem. I don't think I've ever even seen it's off this, I don't know what the self-esteem measurement scale is, the Richter scale. If a nuclear bomb dropped on your town, you could hide beneath Chrystia Freeland's self-esteem and live. No amount of evidence of her stupidity and wrong decisions and idiotic views could dissuade her from the core belief that she was awesome and you were not. So I guess I shouldn't be totally shocked that she's helping to run and destroy your country. But she's doing it in her signature way. She's not getting on the CBC, her media outlet, which like almost all outlets in this wonderful oppressed country is run by the government. It's all state media, it's Albania 1985. And I'm sure we have people whose families are refugees from Albania, welcome, and you know what I'm talking about. But at least you could say of the Albanian leader in 1985, Enver Hoxha, that when he went full fascist, he just didn't mince words. Shut up and obey or we'll shoot you. Chrystia Freeland is wise enough, clever enough, in her serpent-like way, to make it all about your protection and safety. All about your protection and safety. No, we're just trying to help you. That's why you're in shackles.
In Calgary, Carlson went after the British Columbia government for making it legal to provide recreational fentanyl to children, saying that this equates to the government trying to kill your kids. Take a listen to this.
If you have a government that is giving fentanyl to your children, as they are in BC, I notice your premier has a no fentanyl to kids policy, God bless her. I know, and you're applauding. And I'm applauding, and I'm grateful. But how distorted is your world where you have to applaud the one politician's like, we're not going to give fentanyl to the kids today. Okay? But then take two steps further back from that and ask yourself, if someone's giving fentanyl to your children, what's kind of the message of that? Well, they're trying to kill your children, obviously. Fentanyl? It's the #1 cause of death under 40 in the United States. #1 in the whole country, followed by suicide. But if someone's giving fentanyl to your children without telling you, they're trying to kill your children, which are your inheritance, so the only meaningful thing you will ever produce on earth, okay, are your children.
He then turns his focus to Canada's dystopian euthanasia regime, equating it to genocide of the Canadian people.
If you're killing 50,000 of your citizens, if the government is doing that through the MAID program, and a lot of them are not actually terminally ill, they're just sad, and the government is encouraging them to submit to being killed by the government, and then won't release the recent statistics, like, what is that? What is that? Yeah, it's genocide. That's exactly what it is. It's killing large groups of people. And who are those people, by the way? We don't know, because your government hasn't released the stats. What percentage of those were born in Canada? I'd bet right around 100%. So if you're a government, you have the duty to your citizens, people who are from here, people whose ancestors built the place, not exclusively to them, but primarily to them, to your citizens. Like, why else do you exist except to serve your citizens? And if you're targeting your citizens, how many people who arrived in Canada in the last 10 years have opted into the MAID program? I don't know the answer. I'd bet around 0. It's all people who are from here. And now the government brags, oh, we're saving money because they died. That's the darkest thing I can imagine. I bet there's 0 conversation about that in this country, because I know this country and I know what it's like. It's too horrible. No one wants to talk about it. You should talk about it. But more than anything, you should internalize the message of that, which is they hate me. They hate me to the point they're willing to kill me, which they are.
We then hear some remarkably refreshing commentary on Canada's completely insane immigration system, how the government is importing millions of people who don't share Canadian customs and values, and how that will permanently change the makeup of this country.
If they're taking away your voting power by changing the population of your country, which they are doing, and no one wants to talk about that, Canada has the highest immigration rate in the world per capita. And shut up, racist! That's not racist. I don't care if they're coming from New Zealand. I don't care if you're taking the population of Stockholm and moving them to Canada. If you change the population of the country, you change the country. And you dilute the voting power of the people who are vested in that country, the people who are born there, who have lived there long term, who understand the history and the culture of the country, who are bought in. And all of a sudden, their vote means much less. It's math. You guys do that. Math. That's horrifying that this is happening. And there's no public debate over it whatsoever. Why do you think that's happening? Is it for economic reasons? I'd be kind of okay with that. If someone could stand up and say, we're totally changing the population of Canada because we think it's better for our economy. Okay, tell me how. We can have rational conversations. We're adults. I'm a citizen. This is my government too. Tell me how that works. But they can't, because that's not true. Look at your housing prices. Look at the strain on your services. Look at your healthcare system, which no Canadian I meet brags about anymore.
Carlson also notes that all of Canada's legacy media are essentially bought off by the government, and because of that, end up pushing government-approved propaganda disguised as news.
And then they're subsidizing the media to the point where all of your big media outlets, which are disgusting, are state media because they're taking state cash. Do you watch CBC? I do, occasionally. I can turn in any hour of the day and I will learn that I am racist for driving an SUV and not being trans. That's the whole schedule of CBC programming. But interpret that. That's not woke. Oh, it's woke. I hate the woke crap. It doesn't mean anything. They hate you. That's what they're saying. They're saying that you are bad. That's exactly what they're saying. Don't lie to yourselves. That's all I'm saying.
Now, perhaps the most important part of Carlson's speech in Calgary last night was when he talked about what the Canadian government is doing to Christians in this country. How members of Trudeau's inner circle have excused and justified the burning of churches in this country. How premiers across this country authorized the arrest of pastors for preaching the gospel. And the government pushing drugs and legal weed on adolescents.
But take a look at what they're doing to your Christians. And I say this for a couple of, I am a Christian, but that's not why I'm telling you this. I'm telling you this because there's kind of no more inoffensive and peaceful group in the world than the Christians. In fact, there isn't. Their religion tells them, commands them to turn the other cheek and to put the concerns of others above their own concerns. So if you have a problem with those precepts, explain it to me. Speak slowly so I can understand. I think every person in this room, regardless of your faith, can agree, yeah, I'm for that. I wish I was more like that. That's good. We need more of those people in society. Serve others for the sake of service. So if you're hassling that group, maybe you've got another agenda that we should be concerned about, even if we're not in that group. If we burn 90 of their churches to the ground, and the Prime Minister and his little weird buddies are endorsing that. Burning churches, if you're on the side of burning churches, let me just say, I don't need any other facts of the case, you're on the wrong side. If you're throwing preachers in prison for preaching the Christian gospel, not for hurting anyone, not for making pipe bombs, not for trying to castrate other people's children, not for importing millions of people into your country who are not going to have work, just for the crime of preaching the Christian gospel, you go to jail. At the same time, when they're encouraging your kids to do drugs, and not just fentanyl, but weed, don't raise your hand if you have a 15-year-old son, but come up to me after and tell me what you think of legalized weed. For real. And if you have a 15-year-old son, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They did that to you and to your son on purpose. And so in a country like that, in a world like that, if you think that preaching the gospel is so dangerous that the people who do it need to be in prison in shackles, you're serving someone other than the people of Canada, if you know what I mean.
A day before Carlson spoke in Alberta, he released a wide-ranging interview with writer Gordon McGill on his show on X. In this discussion, Carlson and McGill discuss the state of Canada and spend a considerable amount of time discussing the horrible treatment of the Coutts Four, the four men who were arrested at the Coutts border blockade by the RCMP for allegedly plotting to kill an RCMP officer. These men have been held in jail for over 700 days, close to 800 days at this point, without trial and without bail. But in this conversation with McGill, Carlson calls out the feminization and the weakness of conservative politicians in this country.
Trudeau rules because he's got a deal with the leader of the New Democratic Party, Jagmeet Singh. And, obviously he's doing very poorly. Polling indicates that in the next election, it's quite likely that the Conservative Party is going to win. But I don't know if that's going to change anything, right?
Right. The Conservatives in Canada seem very feminized to me and kind of self-hating and sad and afraid.
And while not addressing Conservative politicians directly in his closing remarks in Calgary last night, Carlson takes that same message and calls on Canadians to, as he says, replace our timidity with bravery and be prepared for a fight with existential stakes.
The answer, before you take any sort of action or imagine that some election is going to fix things, which it's not, spoiler alert, because this country, like every country, very much, and maybe especially including my country, has a lot of frauds in that business. Sorry, it does. I would know. It's the one thing I know a lot about. Before any of that takes place, you need to change inside. Your attitudes need to change. And your timidity needs to be replaced by bravery. And so the first thing that you need to do before changing anything in your country is to change everything about your heart. You have to be ready for a contest where the stakes are existential, which they are.
Carlson is right when he calls out the timidity and the lack of courage that we have in this country to stand up and fight back against this government. We shouldn't be in a position where we pack arenas and sell out shows to hear a foreigner talk about the issues that we face in this country. We should have Canadians who call this stuff out, and we should have Canadian politicians whose job it is to oppose the government say exactly what Carlson was saying yesterday. But we don't. It should speak volumes to Canadians that someone like Tucker Carlson is able to come to this country and pack out arenas talking about this country when very few Canadians themselves could have such influence talking about their own country. Time for the ratio of the week. The winner this week is Stephen Guilbeault, Justin Trudeau's climate change minister. It's been a tough week for him. On Monday, we highlighted one series of tweets that got brutally ratioed by the Canadian public, and again, he followed it up a few days later with this one. Pierre Poilievre isn't hiding his plan for the environment. He's searching for environmental conspiracy theories to take their place. By undermining science, Poilievre is saying he would risk Canada's environment and our children's future, and he's not worth that risk. Now, Guilbeault thinks Poilievre is spreading conspiracy theories when he talks about how the federal government is looking to target pizzerias and bagel shops who pollute the air. Guilbeault calls this a conspiracy theory, but according to the Montreal Gazette and a direct quote From a spokesperson at Environment Canada, the NPRI program has recently undertaken compliance promotion activities targeting some wood-fired ovens, such as pizzerias and bagel shops across Canada. Cecilia Parsons, a spokesperson for Environment and Climate Change Canada, told the Gazette in a written statement. 2.6 thousand replies to only 478 likes for Stephen Guilbeault here. Canada is only responsible for 1.6% of global GHG emissions. The idea that Canada could affect global change by taxing carbon emissions while at the same time being among only a tiny sliver of the contribution is pure nonsense, aka fraud. It's the analogous equivalent to Canada trying to empty a swimming pool with a teaspoon while China fills that same pool with a fire hose. It's quite literally impossible mathematically in reality, hence the fraud. Still monitoring cow farts? What percentage of the world's pollution comes from Canada? Less than 2% to be exact, but facts like that just seem to get in the way of the climate change agenda that if we don't believe in, we all must be conspiracy theorists. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us this week on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.